It was a calm afternoon in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone thought they knew each other. The sun was soft, just starting to lower in the sky, and the street smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass from the nearby park. A woman was walking her small dog along the sidewalk, enjoying the peace after a long day. She liked these walks. They gave her a chance to breathe, to think, and sometimes to notice little things that most people overlooked. As she walked past the corner near the park, she noticed something that immediately made her pause. There was a man, probably in his 30s, standing near a small swing set, and two little girls were playing around him. The girls seemed happy, laughing and chasing each other, and the man was smiling, talking to them gently. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but then her eyes narrowed. There was something about the scene that felt off to her, though she couldn't immediately say what it was. Her mind started racing. She felt a tight knot in her stomach. She had heard too many stories on the news about children being in danger, and her protective instincts kicked in. The man was black, and for some reason, that detail, combined with the unfamiliarity of the situation, made her feel uneasy. She watched him for a few more moments, trying to see if there was anything obviously wrong, anything that would confirm her fears. But the children were smiling, and he seemed calm, even gentle. Still, that uneasy feeling didn't go away. She kept thinking about what could happen if she ignored it. What if something was really wrong? What if those children were in danger, and no one was around to help them? Her mind filled with images of worst-case scenarios, and the sense of responsibility grew heavier with every passing second. Finally, she took a deep breath and made a decision. She would call the police. She reached into her bag for her phone, her hands slightly trembling. She dialed the emergency number and waited while the operator answered. She tried to explain what she saw as clearly as possible, giving a description of the man, what he was wearing, and the girls, who seemed about 5 and 7 years old. She told them that he looked suspicious, that she didn't know who he was, and that something about the situation felt wrong. While speaking, she glanced back at the park. The man was still there, talking softly to the girls and pointing at the swings. He looked completely ordinary, almost caring, but her anxiety didn't let her see it that way. She gave the operator more details, mentioning the corner, the swings, and the clothing of the children. By the time she ended the call, she felt a mix of relief and nervousness. Relief that she had done something she thought was responsible, and nervousness about what might happen next. Minutes later, she could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Her heart started racing. The officer would arrive soon, and she wasn't sure how the man would react to police approaching him. She worried about what would happen if he got defensive or scared. She reminded herself that she had only done what she thought was right. When the officer arrived, a tall man in uniform stepped out of the patrol car and approached the scene with a calm but alert expression. The woman hurried over, pointing toward the man and the girls. She explained quickly, almost breathlessly, why she called the police and what she had seen. The officer nodded, listening carefully, his eyes moving from the woman to the man and the children. He spoke softly, introducing himself, and started asking questions to get a sense of the situation. The man turned to face the officer. He was calm, polite, and cooperative. "Hello, officer," he said, his voice steady. "Is everything okay?" The officer asked him who he was and why he was with the children. The man explained that he was a close family friend, and that the girl's mother had asked him to watch over them for a short while she ran some errands. He gave his name and offered to provide contact information for the girl's mother, so the officer could verify everything. The officer noticed how comfortable the children seemed around the man. They laughed freely, ran toward him, and even clung to his hands at times. There was no fear in their eyes, no sign of distress. The officer began to sense that this might not be a dangerous situation after all. He listened to the woman's concerns, but also observed the scene with his own eyes, realizing that appearances can sometimes be misleading. Meanwhile, the woman stood back, watching the interaction. Her anxiety didn't completely go away, but she noticed the officer's calm approach and the man's respectful demeanor. She started to doubt herself. Maybe she had overreacted. Maybe her fears had been influenced by assumptions she didn't even realize she was making. The officer asked the man if he could contact the girl's mother. The man smiled and nodded, pulling out his phone. Within minutes, the mother arrived at the park. She was a warm, kind-looking woman. and the way the children ran to her and hugged her told the officer everything he needed to know. She explained that the man was like a godfather to the children, someone she trusted completely, and that he often helped care for them. The officer turned to the woman and explained the situation calmly. He told her that while it was good to be vigilant, it was important to verify facts before assuming the worst. He didn't scold her, but instead spoke in a way that made her reflect on her actions and her fears. The woman listened, feeling a mix of embarrassment and relief. She realized how easily fear and assumptions could cloud judgment, and how quickly a misunderstanding could escalate. As the officer left, the woman stayed for a few more moments watching the man and the children play. She noticed how natural their interaction was, how genuine their smiles were, and she felt a pang of guilt. She had let fear and stereotypes influence her perception, and now she understood the power of assumptions. Walking home, she reflected on the incident. She thought about how society often jumps to conclusions based on appearance, and how that can affect innocent people. She thought about the officer, who handled the situation with patience and understanding, and the man who showed kindness even in the face of suspicion. She realized that being vigilant didn't have to mean being judgmental, and that understanding the truth required more than just a quick glance. By the time she reached her house, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the street. She felt a deep sense of reflection. The day had started like any other, but it had ended with a lesson she would never forget. She understood that fear could be a powerful motivator, but empathy and careful observation were even stronger. She promised herself to think twice before letting assumptions guide her actions, and to always seek the truth, no matter how small the situation might seem. The man continued to play with the children, unaware of the thoughts racing through the woman's mind. The girl's laughter filled the air, light and carefree, a sound that reminded her that innocence existed even in a world where fear and misunderstanding sometimes took over. She watched for a few more moments, then turned and walked inside, carrying with her a new awareness of how easily judgment could mislead, and how important it was to see the full story before acting. The officer stayed for a few moments longer, carefully observing the situation. The woman was still standing nearby, her hands clutching her bag, her face showing a mixture of worry, curiosity, and embarrassment. The man, however, remained calm. He crouched down to talk to the girls at their level, smiling gently, pointing at the swings and the small sandbox, making little jokes that made them giggle. It was clear that the children trusted him completely, laughing freely and following his instructions without hesitation. The officer decided to speak with the woman first. He approached her with a steady, reassuring voice. "I understand why you were concerned," he said. "It's normal to want to protect children. Can you tell me exactly what made you feel uneasy?" The woman took a deep breath, trying to explain. She spoke about how she didn't recognize the man, how the children seemed alone, and how she had worried about their safety. She admitted that she had felt a little nervous because he was black, and that her thoughts had raced to worst-case scenarios before she could even stop herself. The officer listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. He didn't interrupt or judge her. Instead, he calmly asked questions to get more clarity. "Did you notice anything in the way he acted? Did he do anything that seemed threatening?" he asked. The woman shook her head, realizing that there hadn't been anything threatening at all. Her voice wavered slightly as she admitted, "No, he didn't do anything wrong. I just felt worried." The officer gently explained that while vigilance is important, fear can sometimes lead us to make quick judgments based on appearances or assumptions. He emphasized that it was always best to check facts and context before calling for help. His words were firm but kind, and the woman felt a mixture of shame and relief. She realized she had overreacted, but at least she had acted out of genuine concern rather than malice. Meanwhile, the man noticed the officer talking with the woman. He stayed calm, waiting patiently. When the officer turned to him, he introduced himself properly, providing his name and explaining his relationship with the children. He mentioned that he often helped the mother by taking the girls to the park, teaching them small games and spending quality time with them. He spoke politely, answering questions honestly, and offered to call the children's mother so she could verify everything. The officer nodded and took out his radio, asking for a quick check to ensure everything matched the mother's information. Within minutes, the mother arrived at the park. She was walking briskly, holding her keys and calling out to the children. The girls ran to her, hugging her tightly, and she knelt down to hug them back. Her presence immediately changed the atmosphere. The officer observed how natural the interaction was. The girls were happy. The man smiled warmly, and the woman standing a few feet away felt the tension in her chest start to ease. The mother introduced herself to the officer and explained the situation calmly. "He's been like family to us for years," she said. "I trust him completely with the girls. He watches them often when I need help, and they adore him. There's nothing wrong here." The officer listened carefully, noting how confident and calm she sounded. He could see the relief on the man's face and the innocence in the children's eyes. The officer's expression softened. What had seemed suspicious at first glance was clearly nothing more than a caring adult spending time with two children he trusted deeply. The woman felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She had let fear take over her judgment and had nearly caused unnecessary trouble for an innocent man. She shifted from foot to foot, unsure where to look. The officer noticed her discomfort and spoke gently. "It's okay to be concerned," he said. "But sometimes our minds jump to conclusions. What matters is that you acted out of care, not malice. And now we know the truth." The woman nodded slowly, still processing what had happened. She realized that she had been influenced by assumptions she didn't even recognize. It had never occurred to her that her fear was tied to stereotypes she had absorbed over time. Seeing the man's calmness, the children's trust, and the mother's assurance made her understand how easily appearances can mislead someone. As the officer wrapped up his check, he reminded the woman about the importance of context. "Being vigilant is good," he said, "but always try to observe carefully before deciding someone is a threat. People can be misunderstood, especially when fear or assumptions get in the way. Today could have ended differently if we hadn't taken the time to understand what was really happening." The woman listened intently, her face serious. She realized that she had learned a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The children continued to play, climbing the swings and sliding down the slides, completely unaware of the tension that had filled the air moments before. The man laughed with them, showing them little tricks, giving gentle guidance, and encouraging them to take turns. It was clear that his care for the children was genuine and consistent. He wasn't just supervising them. He was engaging with them, teaching them, and making them feel safe. The woman watched, noticing how natural his interaction was. She remembered her initial fear and contrasted it with what she was seeing now. It was a humbling experience. She had let fear cloud her judgment, and now she saw how innocent actions could be misinterpreted when taken out of context. The officer, noticing her contemplative look, gave her a small nod, acknowledging her reflection without making her feel judged. As the sun continued to set, casting long shadows across the park, the officer prepared to leave. He reminded the mother to keep her phone nearby in case of emergencies, and advised the woman to reflect on what she had learned. The woman thanked the officer, feeling a mix of gratitude and shame. She realized that vigilance is important, but understanding and empathy are even more powerful. Jumping to conclusions based on fear or appearance can have real consequences, and today had been a close call. Before leaving, the officer spoke to the man briefly, thanking him for his patience and cooperation. The man smiled and nodded, showing no sign of anger or resentment. He understood that people sometimes misunderstand situations, especially when fear gets involved. His focus remained on the children, ensuring they were safe and happy, and his calm demeanor reflected a deep sense of responsibility and care. The woman finally turned to leave, her dog pulling her gently toward home. She walked slowly, replaying the events in her mind. She thought about how fear can make people act impulsively, how assumptions can lead to misunderstandings, and how important it is to see the full story before reacting. She understood that this experience had taught her more than she expected, not just about vigilance, but about human nature, empathy, and the consequences of jumping to conclusions. As she walked down the quiet streets, the woman made a promise to herself. She would try to pause before letting fear dictate her actions. She would observe carefully, seek facts, and remember that not everything is as it appears at first glance. Today had been a lesson in patience, understanding, and humility. The man and the children continued their play, the laughter echoing softly in the fading light. The woman, now walking toward her home, realized that she had witnessed something beautiful, even though she had misunderstood it at first. The trust between the children and the man, the mother's calm reassurance, and the officer's measured response all combined to create a small but powerful story about understanding, empathy, and the importance of seeing beyond first impressions. By the time she reached her door, the sun had disappeared completely, leaving only the soft glow of streetlights. She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and reflection. The day had started with fear and suspicion, but it had ended with clarity and understanding. She would never forget the lesson, and she hoped that sharing her story might help others think twice before letting fear and assumptions cloud their judgment. She entered her home quietly, closing the door behind her, and sat down for a moment. She thought about the children, the man, the officer, and herself. Each of them had played a role in a small but important story about human behavior, trust, and understanding. The woman understood now that vigilance is important, but empathy and patience are what truly keep people safe. Fear can mislead, assumptions can hurt, but taking the time to see the truth can prevent unnecessary harm and build a stronger, kinder community. After the initial tension had eased, the officer stayed at the park for a little while longer to make sure everything was clear. The woman had stepped back slightly, still feeling nervous but also curious about how things would unfold. She watched quietly as the officer spoke with the man and the mother, listening to their conversation and trying to understand the full story. She realized that her perspective had been limited. She had seen only part of the picture and had jumped to conclusions. The officer wanted to ensure there were no misunderstandings and that the children were truly safe. He asked the mother to explain her routine and how often the man helped her with the children. She smiled and spoke calmly, saying that he had been part of their lives for several years. He had been there during weekends, school holidays, and even after daycare when she was running errands. The children loved him, and he was someone she trusted completely. She emphasized that he never left them alone in unsafe situations and always looked after them responsibly. The officer took out his notebook and wrote down details while listening. He asked a few more questions to confirm facts: the man's full name, his contact information, and the mother's routine. He even asked the mother to describe the man's relationship with the children, just to ensure that the story matched what he observed. The mother answered patiently, explaining how the girls looked up to him as a role model and how they were comfortable sharing small secrets and stories with him. The officer could see that the children felt safe and happy, which made it clear that there was no danger at all. The woman, standing a little distance away, felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that the children were safe and that her call hadn't escalated into a bigger problem, and guilt for letting fear and assumptions guide her actions. She started thinking about how quickly she had judged the man. Her mind went back to the moment she first saw him playing with the girls and how fear had immediately taken over. She realized that she had never asked herself if she might be wrong or if she was letting bias influence her thoughts. The officer noticed her contemplative expression and walked over to speak with her again. "It's understandable to be concerned," he said gently. "We all want to protect children, but it's important to remember that appearances can be misleading. You acted with care, and that's good, but this situation shows how quickly assumptions can lead to misunderstandings." The woman nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She understood that her fear was natural, but she also realized how easily assumptions can cause unnecessary stress for innocent people. Meanwhile, the man and the mother continued talking, answering questions honestly and calmly. The officer asked the man about how he got involved with the family and how often he spent time with the children. The man explained that he had been friends with the mother for many years and had developed a strong bond with her children. He spoke about simple things like reading stories to them, helping with school projects, and teaching them games in the park. The officer could see that he genuinely cared about the girls and that his actions were guided by kindness and responsibility. The mother also explained how the children looked forward to spending time with him. She described small moments like how he would help them ride their bikes or teach them to play soccer, always making sure they were safe and happy. The officer listened closely, realizing that the children had formed a relationship built on trust, respect, and consistency. This was not a case of danger or suspicion. It was a story of care, friendship, and community support. The woman watched quietly, taking in the details. She felt a mix of emotions. She was grateful that the children were safe, but she also felt embarrassed for jumping to conclusions. She realized that fear could make people act quickly, without thinking about the full context. Her mind kept replaying the moment she had seen the man and the girls, trying to understand why her reaction had been so intense. She recognized that her fear had been influenced by stereotypes she had absorbed over time, and that reflection made her feel both humbled and determined to do better in the future. The officer, noticing her thoughtful expression, spoke again. "It's important to ask questions and observe before making judgments," he said. "Today you were concerned for the children, and that's good. But it's also important to give people the benefit of the doubt and make sure you understand the situation fully. This is a learning experience for all of us." The woman nodded slowly, appreciating his patience and guidance. She realized that understanding and empathy were just as important as vigilance when it came to protecting others. The children, meanwhile, were playing happily, completely unaware of the tension that had filled the park earlier. They ran around the swings and the sandbox, laughing and shouting, showing no signs of fear or discomfort. The man followed them, smiling and guiding them gently. It was clear that he had a natural way of connecting with the children, making them feel safe while giving them space to enjoy themselves. The woman observed the joy on the children's faces and realized that fear had clouded her judgment, preventing her from seeing the truth in that moment. The officer decided to wrap up his visit, satisfied that there was no danger and that the children were in safe hands. He spoke briefly with the mother and the man, reminding them to keep open communication and to ensure the children were always supervised properly. The man thanked the officer for taking the time to check, showing patience and understanding throughout the process. The officer nodded and gave a small smile, appreciating the man's calm demeanor. Before leaving, the officer turned to the woman one last time. "Remember, we all make mistakes," he said gently. "What matters is that we learn from them. Today you acted out of concern, and that's good. But always remember to see the full story before making assumptions. People can be misunderstood, and taking the time to understand can prevent unnecessary harm." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of reflection. She realized that her actions, though well-intentioned, had almost caused unnecessary trouble for someone who had done nothing wrong. As the officer walked back to his car and drove away, the woman stayed for a moment, watching the man and the children. She felt a mix of relief, gratitude, and a little shame. Relief that the children were safe, gratitude that the officer had handled the situation with patience and fairness, and shame for letting fear guide her actions. She understood now that assumptions could hurt innocent people, and she promised herself to be more mindful in the future. The man continued to play with the children, laughing and guiding them through small games. The children's happiness was infectious, and the woman couldn't help but smile, even as she reflected on her mistake. She realized that the man's actions were driven by care, kindness, and responsibility, and that he deserved trust, not suspicion. This realization stayed with her, making her feel more aware of the impact her thoughts and assumptions could have on others. The mother watched the children with a proud smile, appreciating the man's help and the joy he brought to their lives. She knew that the world could sometimes misjudge people, but she also knew that trust and understanding were more important than fear. The woman observed this and felt a quiet admiration for both the mother and the man. She realized that the community was stronger when people acted with empathy and kindness, and that assumptions could easily weaken that trust. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the park, the woman finally started walking home. Her mind was full of thoughts about fear, judgment, trust, and understanding. She knew she had learned an important lesson. Being vigilant is important, but seeing the whole story and understanding the context is even more crucial. She realized that her assumptions could have caused unnecessary harm, and that reflection and empathy were tools she needed to carry with her every day. Walking through the quiet streets, she thought about how quickly people judge based on appearances, and how those judgments can affect innocent lives. She understood that fear could make people act impulsively, and that stereotypes could shape perceptions in harmful ways. But she also realized that taking the time to observe, ask questions, and seek the truth could prevent misunderstandings and build stronger communities. By the time she reached her home, the woman felt a deep sense of reflection. She sat quietly for a moment, thinking about the children, the man, the mother, and the officer. Each of them had played a role in a story that had begun with fear, but ended with understanding. She understood that vigilance, empathy, and patience were all necessary to protect and support others, and that today had been a lesson she would never forget. She finally went inside, closing the door behind her, and felt a quiet sense of gratitude. The day had started with suspicion and worry, but ended with clarity and understanding. The woman knew she had learned an important lesson about fear, assumptions, and the importance of seeing the full picture before acting. She promised herself to carry this lesson forward, hoping that her awareness could help her and others make better decisions in the future. The woman stayed at the edge of the park for a while, watching the man and the children. They moved around the swings and the sandbox with such ease and comfort that it was hard to reconcile that only an hour ago she had felt a deep sense of alarm. The children were laughing, completely free from worry, while the man followed their playful movements with gentle guidance and encouragement. Every small interaction he had with them, the way he pointed to the slides, how he helped them take turns, the soft corrections he offered when they stumbled, showed patience and care. She shifted uncomfortably, her mind replaying the scene from earlier, how quickly she had assumed danger, how fast her imagination had turned a harmless situation into a scenario of threat. She could feel her cheeks warming with embarrassment. The officer's words echoed in her mind. We all want to protect children, but appearances can be misleading. She realized that she had let fear and preconceived notions dictate her actions instead of taking a moment to understand the reality of the situation. She stood there reflecting. The officer returned. He had taken a few moments to finish his paperwork in his car, but now he approached her again. His steps were calm and deliberate, as though he wanted to ensure she fully understood what had happened. It's normal to feel alarmed, he said gently. You were trying to do the right thing, but fear can sometimes exaggerate what we see. What's important is understanding the full context before making judgments. The woman nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and shame. She appreciated his understanding, but she also couldn't ignore the realization that she had almost caused unnecessary trouble for an innocent man. She spoke quietly, trying to explain her thoughts. I didn't mean any harm. I thought they might be in danger. I didn't know him and I didn't recognize the situation. I guess my mind jumped to conclusions. The officer listened attentively, nodding. That's understandable, he replied. We all have instincts, and sometimes those instincts are influenced by past experiences, stories we've heard, or even biases we don't recognize. The key is to learn from it. Today, you've seen the importance of pausing and observing before acting. The man and the mother had moved closer by this point, noticing the conversation. The man smiled gently at the woman, a gesture that was calm and non-judgmental. There was no anger in his eyes, no resentment for the fear she had felt or the call she had made. He had lived with patience and understanding, knowing that sometimes people misjudge situations without intending harm. The woman felt her shame grow. She wanted to apologize, but words felt inadequate for the mistake she had almost made. Finally, she took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. I'm sorry, she said softly. I thought something was wrong and I called the police. I see now that I was mistaken. You weren't doing anything wrong. I just assumed too quickly. The man's face softened. He nodded, his calmness reassuring. It's okay, he said simply. I understand. You were concerned for the children. That's natural. What matters is that they're safe now. The woman felt a wave of relief mixed with lingering guilt. Relief that the children were indeed safe, and guilt for letting assumptions guide her actions. She realized how powerful fear could be, how easily it could distort reality. She also realized that the man's patience and kindness had prevented a tense situation from escalating. His ability to remain calm even when misunderstood had created space for understanding to emerge. The officer watched the exchange silently, allowing the woman to process her feelings while also observing the interaction between the man and the children. He knew that moments like these were not just about the immediate situation, but also about learning lessons that could shape behavior in the future. The woman, he could see, was beginning to reflect deeply on her assumptions and her fear-driven reactions. The mother, standing nearby, watched the exchange with a small, proud smile. She knew that her children's safety had never been in doubt, and she appreciated the patience and understanding shown by both the officer and the man. She also saw the woman struggle with guilt and self-reflection, recognizing that the experience could be transformative. The mother quietly thought about how society sometimes misjudged people, and how understanding and empathy could make all the difference in preventing unnecessary tension. As the conversation ended, the officer gave one last reminder. "It's good to care, but always try to observe before reacting," he said. Assumptions can cause real consequences, especially when they involve someone's reputation or safety. Today you've seen how quickly a misunderstanding can happen, and hopefully, you've also seen how patience, communication, and calm observation can resolve it. The woman nodded solemnly, taking in every word. She felt the weight of responsibility in her own actions and the importance of self-awareness. She realized that her instincts, while protective, needed to be balanced with careful observation and an understanding of context. She made a mental note to be more mindful in the future, to pause, reflect, and seek clarity before letting fear take over. The children, unaware of the tension that had passed, continued to play happily. Their laughter and movement were natural and carefree, a sharp contrast to the anxiety the woman had felt earlier. The man guided them gently, showing them small games and encouraging teamwork and kindness. He maintained a careful balance of attention, allowing them freedom while ensuring their safety. The officer and the woman observed quietly, absorbing the normalcy and trust present in the scene. At one point, the man crouched down to show the girls how to balance on a low beam in the playground. He held their hands gently, encouraging them to try slowly and praising their efforts. The children giggled and encouraged each other, trusting the man completely. The woman's heart softened as she watched the genuine care and guidance he offered. She realized how easily she had misinterpreted such harmless and loving behavior as suspicious. Feeling the need to fully acknowledge her mistake, the woman took another step closer. She spoke softly, addressing both the man and the mother. "I understand now," she said. "I see how much you care for them, and I see that I was wrong to assume anything. I hope you can forgive my fear-driven judgment." The man nodded warmly, and the mother gave a reassuring smile. There was no anger or resentment, only understanding and acceptance. The officer, seeing the resolution, finally prepared to leave. He offered a few words of advice one last time. "Today was a good reminder for all of us. Fear can make us act quickly, but understanding and empathy are stronger tools. Observing, asking questions, and seeking the truth are the best ways to protect others without causing unnecessary harm." He nodded to the man and the mother, then to the woman before heading back to his patrol car. With the officer gone, the park returned to its quiet, relaxed rhythm. The woman stood for a moment, watching the man and the children continue their playful activities. She felt a deep sense of reflection, realizing that her actions, while well-intentioned, had almost caused unnecessary stress and tension. She understood now that quick judgments based on fear or assumptions could harm innocent people, and she silently promised herself to approach similar situations with more care and awareness in the future. The sun had dipped lower, painting the sky with soft hues of orange and pink. Shadows stretched across the grass, and the air held a quiet calm. The children's laughter mingled with the gentle rustling of leaves, creating a peaceful backdrop that contrasted with the anxiety that had filled the park earlier. The woman felt a mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, humility, and a renewed awareness of how perceptions can shape actions. As she began to walk home, her dog trotting happily beside her, the woman reflected on the lessons of the day. She understood the importance of vigilance, yes, but she also recognized the power of observation, understanding, and empathy. She knew that her assumptions had been influenced by fear, and that awareness and reflection could prevent such mistakes in the future. The man and the children continued their time together in the park, their bond evident in every interaction. The woman realized that true care and trust were visible in actions, not just words. She thought about how patience, understanding, and calmness had diffused a situation that could have escalated unnecessarily. Today she had witnessed the power of perspective and the importance of seeing the full story before judging. By the time she reached her home, the woman felt a quiet sense of closure. The day had been filled with fear, misunderstanding, and tension, but it had ended with clarity, understanding, and a valuable lesson. She knew she would carry this experience with her, mindful of the ways fear can cloud judgment and the ways empathy and observation can bring clarity and prevent harm. Sitting quietly in her living room, she thought once more about the children, the man, the mother, and the officer. Each had played a role in a small but important story, a story about fear, assumptions, understanding, and empathy. She realized that today had been more than just an encounter in the park. It had been a lesson about human nature, trust, and the responsibility we all have to seek the truth before acting. The next morning, the woman woke up with a quiet sense of reflection still lingering in her mind. She could not shake the images from the previous day, the children laughing, the man patiently guiding them, the officer calmly explaining the importance of observation before judgment. She felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and lingering guilt. She had learned an important lesson, but it was one she knew she needed to carry with her in real life. Fear had driven her actions, assumptions had clouded her judgment, and the experience had shown her how easily a misunderstanding could escalate if left unchecked. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the sun rise over the quiet streets. The world outside seemed peaceful, yet she knew that in moments like yesterday, people often acted on impulses shaped by incomplete information or unconscious biases. She thought about how fortunate it was that the officer had responded with patience, that the man had shown understanding, and that the children had remained safe and unaffected by her fear. Each of these outcomes felt like a small miracle of human care and empathy, and she promised herself to honor that lesson in her daily life. Later that day, she decided to take a walk through the neighborhood again, hoping to clear her mind and reflect more on what had happened. As she walked, she thought about the man and the children. She realized how easily trust could be established and how deeply people's actions could influence others' lives. The man had built a relationship of trust with the children, and his patience and kindness had created a safe environment for them. That trust had shielded the children from harm, and had even buffered the tension she had brought into the situation. She felt a profound respect for the way he handled everything. She paused near the park, looking at the swings, the slides, and the sandbox where the events had unfolded. It all seemed so ordinary now. Yet she remembered the anxiety and fear she had felt just hours before, the laughter of children, the calm guidance of an adult, the careful observation of the officer. These simple things had revealed an important truth. Appearances could be misleading, and the human capacity for patience, understanding, and empathy could resolve situations that might otherwise have escalated. As she walked further, she thought about how the experience had changed her perspective. She realized that fear was a powerful motivator, but it could also blind people to reality. Assumptions could lead to unnecessary conflict, embarrassment, or worse, harm to innocent individuals. Her mind went back to the moment she had first seen the man with the children and the sudden surge of suspicion she had felt. She now understood how unfair that feeling had been, and how it had been shaped by biases she hadn't even consciously recognized. She also reflected on the officer's role in the story. His calmness and patience had prevented the situation from escalating, and his words had left a lasting impression on her. He had shown her that authority and empathy could coexist, and that guidance from someone experienced and thoughtful could turn a tense situation into a learning opportunity. She realized that the officer had acted as a bridge between misunderstanding and truth, providing clarity and reassurance for everyone involved. Later in the week, she returned to the park, this time at a different hour when fewer people were around. She wanted to see the environment from a new perspective, to understand more about the dynamics of the community and the people who lived there.